2 years of COVID orders. It's pretty incredible that it's been 24 months of the pandemic, and tragic all the lives that were lost, tragic all the lives that have been altered, and obviously you can't downplay that. But one thing I think that we can do now, 2 years into it, is look back and reflect on everything that's transpired, and in particular in the state of Illinois, when it comes to the role of government in our lives and how the three branches of government have worked here in the state of Illinois over the past 2 years. It is the WMAY Morning News Feed. I'm Greg Bishop, now 6:39, and you can chime in live and local, 217-629-7970, or you can email bishoponair@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just search out Bishop on Air. But Governor J.B. Pritzker has issued more than 110 executive orders and 2 years worth of 30-day emergency proclamations in the name of managing the COVID-19 pandemic. Some at the State House saying that there needs to be more oversight. So we'll definitely open it up for phone calls. Again, 217-629-7970. That's the phone number, 217-629-7970. Let's go ahead and take one real quick before we share with you some of the reaction of state lawmakers. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Hi, Greg.
Hey.
Hey, so you should look up what San Antonio, it broke yesterday. Their school, elementary school, did a segregation experiment without letting parents know. And all these psychological experiments on kids. That's his elementary school.
I'm having a real hard time hearing your phone. It's breaking up. I heard elementary school. I heard something about segregation and experiments. So those are the only things I could hear, at least. So maybe try it a little bit later. 217-629-7970 is the phone number. But again, 2 years worth. The first COVID-19 order was actually on March 12th of 2020. And that dealt with cannabis regulation. And it didn't really get much attention at all. Very, very minor area of the economy. But then that quickly evolved. That turned into a cascade of orders. Everything from closing indoor dining, and it was supposed to be 2 weeks to slow the curve. That turned into a stay-at-home order that lasted 10 months. That turned into your kids can't go to school. That turned into small mom-and-pop businesses being told they can't open for in-person service. Wow, the big box stores could, and you had the impacts on children, the impacts on business, and so on, and the vaccine mandates as well. All of this transpiring over the past 24 months, but it's rather interesting to see just how exactly certain individuals at the State House are reacting to this. I touched base with Democratic State Representative Will Guzzardi and Republican State Senator Sue Rezin, both of which shared their thoughts, and in particular, the idea of where we've come from, the level of authority that the governor has when it comes to executive orders, and the lack of action from the State House all of that time, the past 2 years, dealing specifically with COVID-19, and the call for Republicans to have some more oversight on all of this. So here's State Representative Will Guzzardi and State Senator Sue Rezin back-to-back talking about COVID-19 executive orders and whether there should be more oversight on all of this.
When the pandemic began, there was no way for the legislature to convene, right? We couldn't even get in the same room. So we needed leadership in that moment. We needed the governor to step in and take the emergency actions he did to protect the people of this state. And I think over the past 2 years, we have developed more and more of a role in this conversation. As we've been able to reconvene as a legislature, we've been able to have some oversight in these areas and to make some important legislative changes to protect the people of Illinois. And I think that's the appropriate role for the legislative branch. We have to be a part of government and a co-equal branch of government with the executive.
So, I mean, we're entering our 2-year anniversary of the beginning of the pandemic. And since then, the governor has issued approximately 100 executive orders. So he is governing by himself. At the beginning, I understand we didn't know what we were dealing with when COVID hit, but several months into the pandemic, we said as a co-equal branch of government that the legislator should be part of the decision. If you look at other states around the country, they were open safely during COVID, and they continue to really thrive now. We are struggling to get back. We're struggling to employ people. We have higher than normal unemployment versus other states coming out of the pandemic. There are many issues that we look at in the past 2 years, and finally people rose up and said enough is enough. And they took the governor to task in the court system, and they have won with these mandates that were handed down to the school systems throughout the entire state. And they won, and essentially you're seeing pushback. We've asked to be part of the process. We are co-equal branch of government that has been left out of the loop when the governor chooses to make many of these heavy-handed decisions. Well, we have a bill, Senate Bill 3888, which does the same thing. It reins in the powers that the governor used during this pandemic and really shortens his ability to use executive order. And that's what needs to happen. We're a co-equal branch of government. There needs to be checks and balances between the governors, the executive branch, and the legislative branch, and that's what we hope to see with this bill.
Thinking about it a little differently, I mean, I don't think it's been 2 years of COVID. I think it's been COVID and then Alpha and then Delta and then Omicron. And each of those variants has presented a very different set of challenges to the state. So who knows what the next wave of this is going to look like? I mean, knock wood, hopefully we're through the worst of it. But there could be a variant that acts totally differently that starts spreading tomorrow. And we just will need to be able to respond to it in a different way. The response to the next thing is not going to look the same as the response to the last one.
So again, that's State Representative Will Guzzardi, a Chicago Democrat, and State Senator Sue Rezin, a Republican from Morris, kind of laying out different perspectives as to where we've come from and whether or not there needs to be more oversight for these types of authorities. We'll update a little bit more on some of the other things that are happening with COVID around the world and even here locally in Springfield. But first, your phone calls at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Yeah, she took the words right out of my mouth. You said 3 forms of government were handling this, and it was only actually one form, and it was one guy the whole entire time. You telling me that they couldn't have met with Zoom calls?
Well, at first,
like everybody else did?
And I remember this. There were some certain rules they had to pass, and in order to even pass those rules, they would all have to have gotten together. And if you recall, they spent time, at least the Illinois House did. They went over to the Prairie Capital Convention Center at the time. I think the Bank of Springfield Center now. They of course had to rent that and had food catered and all that, and it would cost, I think, like $300,000+ or something like that. But they did that so they could socially distance and wear masks and change the rules, and they did change the rules a bit. And that allowed for the remote hearings and so forth. But when it comes to dealing with COVID-19 orders specifically, even when they were able to get together, they never brought that up. The governor never called a special session, which he could have done to say, hey, guys, check my authority. Or, for instance, let's make a mask mandate so that we don't have confusion all around the schools. Even Tom DeVore said if the state legislature did that, he wouldn't have had to sue.
And if the mask,
go ahead.
If the masks were working and the social distancing, why couldn't they have had half of the Democrats, half the Republicans come in, and then the other half do a Zoom call? And then the next meeting, the ones that were on the Zoom do the in-person.
The Senate kind of did that, and they got a lot done. I mean, listen, in the past 2 years, they passed sweeping criminal justice legislation that reformed a lot of things with the criminal justice system and put on different regulations for police. They passed that. They also passed sweeping energy legislation, huge bill dealing with energy that's set to close coal-fired power plants by 2040. They passed that. They dealt with these major issues.
2 things they passed that aren't going to help anybody.
Well, 2 things that they passed and they dealt a lot of time with, but they did not take up checking the governor's authority. And when I asked the Senate president over the last summer, why aren't you guys checking the authority? He knocked on wood and said, hopefully we're through the worst of it. 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Hey, good morning, Bishop.
Hey.
Yeah, hey, this this whole thing through COVID, it seems like all these executive orders, it's been all about the control. You know, we're gonna get these people, and we're gonna control them, and we're gonna tell them how to live. I don't know if this is true or not. Maybe you can back me up on it or tell me I'm full of crap. Anyway, I heard yesterday that President Biden issued an executive order to come for I guess, I don't know, the mints or whoever to come up with a digital currency.
Yeah, we do. We plan on getting to that. It's a little bit off the topic, but he signed an executive order essentially saying, hey, federal government, look into digital currency and how that operates. And we'll unpack that a little bit later on. But back to COVID. Some of the things, of course, we've seen is all around the world, people are lifting their mitigations. Austria is actually suspending their mandatory COVID-19 vaccine law for adults. That was pretty heavy-handed. Meanwhile, Malaysia is reopening its borders to all travelers amid the transition to an endemic COVID, not a pandemic. And here locally, you've got the UIS Performing Arts Center that's no longer requiring you to wear a mask or no longer requiring you to show proof of vaccine. So are we through the worst of it? It appears that way. And I'll tell you, being at the state capitol yesterday, mask wearing, it's probably 30%. A lot of people from the public are visiting the Capitol again. It seems that it is open. And of course, we'll be there again today because state lawmakers are back at it. So interesting that I think we're going to be looking at the past 2 years with a magnifying glass. And there's all kinds of different aspects. Today, you're going to hear more about the tragic LaSalle Veterans Home deaths that happened in November of 2020, months after the start of the pandemic, but it was shown that the protocols weren't in place and the Pritzker administration didn't respond to it as quickly as they probably should have. So you'll probably hear more about that today as well. A lot of different elements of the past 2 years that needs to be reviewed with proper oversight, let alone all of the COVID-19 spending that's happened all over the place with trillions of dollars going out across the country. All right, it is the WMAY Morning News Feed.